Hi, my name's Ian Puddick. I've been exposing police corruption for many, many years. I have a website, policeexpenses.co.uk, which the counter-terrorism police prosecuted before and lost. And I've just been tackling the issue of police accountability since I was brutalised in custody. The CCTV was wiped to the police station and the officers all had amnesia. Well, I remembered. So, I've just been interested. I've had a very strict upbringing. I always believe the police were the good guys, the baddies were the baddies. I didn't believe the police could misbehave. And they do misbehave. Why do they misbehave? Because they can. So we're just making a very short series of videos called The Police Whistleblowers. And we're starting with Paul Page. And Paul Page has got a very, very interesting story to tell. Ex-Royal Protection Police at Buckingham Palace. I won't say any more. I'll let Paul take the first video away. So if you just want to tell us, Paul, you got in trouble. You got in a lot of trouble. Do you want to tell us about that, just so that the viewer just gets some context about what's happened?
Okay. I spent many years in the Royal Protection Department from 1998 to 2004, I think it was. Basically, I got myself involved in a investment fraud. I put my hands up. It started off as...
Did it start off as a fraud?
No, but it's like anything. I mean, if anyone's ever been involved in the stock market, some people call it the devil's casino because it basically can suck you in, suck you dry and spit you out. I got a 6-year prison sentence for fraud. And I've said openly that I'm sorry for what happened.
And do you have to register that business with the police, or do you just do it all on the sly, on the quiet?
No,
how does it work?
That's the company that I created, United Land and Property Developments. That was I registered that with the police with the job. It had to be authorised by the police.
So they knew about it.
They knew about it, yeah. But initially it didn't start off as a fraud, but it ended up as one.
Yeah, no, I realise that.
As the chain of events went on, as I say. And the 6-year sentence, really, as I've said publicly, it should have been an 8, for what I did. The trust that I breached and the people that I, affected.
So you've been arrested, Paul.
Yeah.
Presumably you've been investigated by the Internal Corruption Police.
Anti-corruption command, yeah.
So they've come and so what did they do?
Well...
Were they tough, really robust?
They visited me at my home. It was 3 detectives, inspector and 2 sergeants, and they basically said to me, look, if you resign, most of this will go away. What I wanted to prove, and for the Royal Protection Department and Anti-Corruption Department and the prosecution to attempt to discredit what I was saying, but they never did. Officers forging their firearms permits in order to carry on carrying a firearm. If we go down the line of what I'd said in court, I mean, I'd already spoken to Michael Gillard about what I knew before I went to court because I was frightened that it was going to get shut down, which they did try to do.
He's written a brilliant book about this for Queen and Currency. Absolutely fantastic. A real insight.
I mean, they actually used part of the press had actually got onto his book because of what happened with Prince Andrew, what I'd said back then. And he'd written it in the book and had used that in their newspaper articles, quoting from his book. Buckingham Palace is probably one of the most secure buildings in the country. The sophisticated alarm systems, I'm not going to go obviously into details,
no.
But there's a number of sophisticated alarm systems that are there to stop people who are not meant to be getting into the palace getting in, obviously.
Of course.
They can pinpoint an intruder wherever he tries to enter the palace, he or she, and they can literally pinpoint their movements through various sensors and whatever else to the nearest foot. Obviously, coupled with that, you've got an armed response force that will be tasked to immediately attend that particular area and deal with the potential threat. So you've got all these security procedures in place, primarily to stop anyone who's uninvited.
You do still read the occasional story. Someone's got in and done this and done that.
But what you have to remember is that there is a set procedure. So somebody may well get into the palace, but by that time there'd be a number of officers with the Queen and with the Duke, what members of the royal family. They would be surrounded by armed officers. They would be secure and they'll be in lockdown. So there would be no threat to those principles. And then that person that would obviously not to mention that outside measures that would be employed. A helicopter would come, there'd be dog vans, more armed police would turn up, so that area would be iron curtain.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That threat would be eliminated. Yes, we've had Fathers for Justice climb on a balcony, and it's a bit embarrassing, but we're not going to shoot someone for protesting. At the end of the day, if someone's running at you with a knife or something, that's a different kettle of fish. But obviously, you have to deal sensitively with people like that.
Sure.
But anyway, what I'm trying to explain is that there's a set procedure for security at the palace, which anyone with half a brain would understand would be.
And were they always followed?
No. I mean, if we go down to the most basic form now, I'm going to explain this. Obviously, if it's the old saying, if your name's not down, you're not getting in, and it's the same principle at the palace. There were certain entry points to the palace. If an unexpected guest or a member of the royal family, you'll come through the front. So if anyone looks at the front of the palace, they'll see the officers on the north centre gate. What happens is, again, the procedure is that the private secretary for one of the members of whoever it is, member of the royal family, will ring down to the Privy Purse, which is an office located at the front. As you go into the palace from the front, you'll see guests walking in. That office takes all the details of appointments for members of the royal family and senior household members. Now, what they do is they give the information of who the person is coming, what time they're coming, and obviously who they come to see. Prince Charles, the Duke of Edinburgh, and the Queen. They would all follow that same set of protocol.
Yeah.
The only one who didn't, for a number of females that I dealt with, obviously I'm not going to say what other officers dealt with. I know what I dealt with, and my colleagues who were with me at these particular times. He was the only one that we would have to not follow security protocol. So he would basically.
And did your bosses know that?
Yeah, we complained, and we were told it is what it is, and he's Prince Andrew, and if we're going to breach security protocol, then it is what it is. So, for example, we would get a call from his footman or his valet, and we would just be told there's a female turning up for Prince Andrew, just let her straight into the quad. Now, what the quad is the quadrangle. So if you look at the front of the palace, there's two big large metal gates, and basically usually they're open during the day, or one of them is. And within that quadrangle there are a number of doors for members of the royal family. So the Queen's got her own entrance door, the Duke's got his own entrance door, and so has Prince Andrew. He's got his own entrance door. So if this young lady has turned up, she doesn't have to give us her name. Which all she has to say is, "I'm here for Prince Andrew." Well, the issue with that potentially is used to get a lot of people who weren't of sound mind and body used to say, "So I've got an appointment with the Queen." So there could have been a time when someone turned up and said, "I've got an appointment with Prince Andrew," and we unknowingly let somebody who's not got an appointment with Prince Andrew because we don't know who they are, and we're not allowed to ask who they are. And so this happened on many occasions when I was there, ranging from sort of 4 o'clock to up to 10, 11 o'clock at night. We'd just get a call to say, there's a female turning up, she's to be let in. On one particular occasion, I was on the post. Now, as I say, we put all the appointments in, and the Privy Purse rang and said, right, there's a female coming, a 1 o'clock appointment, or roughly around that time, for Prince Andrew. Her name is not to be entered into the appointments book, specifically not to be entered in. So, okay, well, who is it? We were told it's Ghislaine Maxwell. On this particular occasion, it was 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock appointment. So
during the day.
Yeah, during the day. So she turned up in a Range Rover, chauffeur-driven Range Rover, and we were the driver announced who it was, and she was just let in. And she ended up having a picnic with Prince Andrew in the back garden, because as we walked through into the garden, he was sat with her by the summer house, having a very lavish picnic, like opposite the Queen's bedroom window, and we thought, it's a bit cheeky because of who she was. Anyway, we left it at that, and that happened, not the picnics, but the visits, and told not to put in the book. At least when I was there, 2 to 3 times, maybe 4 times maximum, that I can remember. What we were doing was against security protocol, and even when we registered this with senior officers, they ignored it as well. Prince Andrew off duty is a different person, So on one occasion we it was late, it was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was on post with my colleague. For some reason there was a breakdown in communications, and we didn't get the call to say that there was a female turning up for the Duke, Prince Andrew. And she actually turned up at the security post and said she was there was 3 of us on duty this occasion, 3 officers, and she said, "Oh hi, I'm here to see Prince Andrew, so just bear with us." So we tried to ring, because it was late, there was nobody in the offices, and we couldn't get hold of his footman. So obviously we are in a position where we can't give entry to this person because we have no clarification that she is in fact expected. So we obviously relayed this to the lady and said, "Look, really sorry, but we can't let you in." So she said, "Well, kindly offered." She said, "Well, I'll ring him. I'll give him a call on my mobile, and obviously you can speak to him." So I said, "Yeah, that's not a problem." And so my colleague, who was quite a big lad, quite plump, let's put it that way, he took the phone. She rang Prince Andrew, and he obviously said to the female, "Put the officer on the phone." So my colleague picked the phone up, and all we heard was, "Listen to me, you fat lardy ass cunt, let my guest in immediately before I come down there." But he was raging. It wasn't like, we all heard it, even the young lady went bright red with embarrassment. But it was clear to us as officers that he had appetite for females a lot younger than himself. Now, I'm not saying they were below the age of consent, and I'm not going to say sit here and say that I would class any of them as teenagers, but certainly with ladies in their early 20s. Another occasion was when I was in the palace, in the police lodge, and there was a call come out that there's a suspicious male or an unknown male seen loitering on the Queen's corridor. Well, that's where the Queen resides, albeit she wasn't in residence on this occasion, but they couldn't identify who this person was. So they tasked myself, a sergeant, and 2 other PCs.
And roughly what time is this?
This would have been about 10 o'clock at night, half.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
late.
Yeah. And so we 2 of us went one way, 2 of us went another way, in order to come over end of this person. We don't know who it was. And then as we did, we entered the Queen's floor on both sides and approached. We realised it was Prince Andrew, dressed scruffily, in a jogging suit or whatever. I can't remember it exactly, but it was. He was dressed in a scruffy sort of clothing. So as we approached, we realised who it was, and my sergeant stepped forward and said, "Really sorry, Your Highness. We had a security alert. You weren't identified on camera, so we had to come and check it out." And he just turned around and said, "Listen to me, this is my house, and I'll go where I want. Now, fuck off." But we've explained to you why we're here. We're not gate crashing your party. We've come for security to do our job. But that was not good enough for the Duke. He just give us a bit of verbal abuse, told us to fuck off, which we did.
Obviously.
Not only that, the amount of people or women, at least 2 or 3 occasions that I'd seen, female visitors being driven home by police officers. Well, sorry, we're not a taxi service. We're there for your protection. Yeah, we're not a taxi service. So, in terms of what Prince Andrew would use police officers for, he was an abuser in terms of the way he treated his staff. It's as simple as that.
And presumably when officers had reported that to their bosses, obviously...
It was ignored.
It was ignored,
yeah. On one occasion, which we thought was strange, and it ended up being called the Chelsea Harbour Girls, was, again, it was myself and a colleague on duty, and we get a call, there's a taxi coming with 2 females for Prince Andrew. Same procedure, no names, just let them straight into the quad. But because it was late, we had to go and open up the gates in order for security. When it gets dark, we lock the gates. And on this particular occasion, we had to run and open the gates for this taxi. Taxi approaches, myself and my colleague look in the taxi, and there's 2 young females in their early 20s. But they were, if I was to describe the clothing as scantily clad, it was very low cut tops, very short dresses, heavy makeup. They were both drinking from cans of Coke, giggling and laughing. And the reason why we noted it, A, because of the way they were dressed, the late hour, but also the fact that they're coming to Buckingham Palace to meet a member of the royal family. It's not quite the attire you expect for someone to come to visit a member of the royal family. Obviously, my colleague was of the opinion, I'm not saying they were prostitutes, I don't believe they were, but my colleague, whether it was banter or not, was straight on the phone to other officers once we let him in and said, like, Andrew's got a couple of Toms in. For anyone who doesn't know what Toms are, they're prostitutes. Purely because of the way they were dressed back in the day. So what that led to was every officer on the unit that night waiting for these females to come out to get a glimpse of them. Because by the time it had gone round to everyone, they were now prostitutes.
Yeah.
That's how it was. It was just a boring night duty, and there was a bit of fun to be had.
Yeah.
And so on this occasion, the control room was told, keep an eye on Andrew's floor. When you see the females leave, radio up so we all know. So, because they only could come one way at this occasion, they would exit through the side door, which was a separate exit to the palace, not through the front, it's through the side, which when it gets late, that's what most people do. And so, on this occasion, literally an hour after they turned up, officer in the control room radios up all units, females now leaving 4-1's apartments. Now 4-1 is code for Prince Andrew. So you would have thought that the Queen had pressed the emergency button, panic button, because the amount of officers that come running through the corridor to get to the side door to view these two prostitutes, they were probably just normal whatever. Sure. So there was about 10 officers in this area. It's like an airlock even with a glass bit where they would go into, and then the door would open, and then they would come through into this foyer bit. And we was all stood in the foyer bit waiting for the two females. But what the idiot in the control room didn't tell us was that Prince Andrew was with them. So obviously, as they came through the glass door,
there's lots of police officers.
Lots of police officers smiling happily at them to get a look at these two prostitutes, which then dropped to complete horror when Prince Andrew walked in behind them. And then the next thing that happened is you had 10 coppers trying to get through one single door, falling out into the car park and hiding behind cars. It was quite funny at the time.
Yeah.
Hiding behind parked cars on their hands and knees, as Prince Andrew proceeded to walk these two females out through and stand on the roadside with them. Now that in itself is peculiar because I've never seen a member of the royal family escort two females from the palace and stand on the side of Buckingham Gate and wait for a taxi for 5 minutes and hail a taxi. And I'm pretty sure the taxi driver in has never experienced it before. Yeah. So obviously all that did was that just in the police officers' minds then confirmed their suspicions.
Would that be a security risk? The fact is out.
It's obviously that the officers were not allowed to stand with him because they would have got shouted at, but he was now standing on the side of a road with two females waiting to hail a taxi. What we found peculiar with that is, well, why wasn't one of the officers tasked, as they do, like I've said to you, drive them home in his Jag? Or what would happen is he would have arranged for a taxi to be waiting for them and they would come out and get straight in a taxi. But for him to actually come out and stand on the side of the road, and I'm not casting aspersions, but it's a rarity.
Yeah, of course.
You know, that doesn't happen.
No.
So all that did was serve to fuel the Chelsea Harbour Club, the Chelsea Harbour girls' theory that they were, like, you know, I'm saying they weren't, but other officers have a different opinion at the end of the day. So that was quite a peculiar lot of event.
Prince Andrew has admitted to being obviously in Ghislaine Maxwell's London house, Epstein's New York mansion, Epstein's Florida mansion, and obviously on Epstein's Caribbean island. What would be the police, because he doesn't just get on a plane and fly out there, presumably there must be some sort of police process that the police would need to go through before, you know, any royal would travel anywhere. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they quoted me in the Daily Mirror about the notes when it came up about the pizza restaurant scenario. Now, when the member of the royal family goes anywhere or to a specific location, that Prince Andrew said that this was a specific location because it was for an event, a birthday or whatever it was. So that being specific, because an officer may not keep a note of every single, he might go to a shop, they might pop, but certain significant places, it would make a note in case something had happened, and they've got notes to say we were attending this at this certain time and whatever else. So the pizza restaurant scenario would have been noted by the officers, and they would have probably had 2 protection officers when he went there, potentially 1, but I'd say 2 because his daughter was there as well. So there would have probably been more, because there was more than one member of the royal family.
They would have done a recce, or
possibly, depending on sort of how, if there was quite a few members of the royal family, but I think it was just the daughter and Prince Andrew. So potentially they may have gone there earlier in the day, or an officer may have gone there prior to Prince Andrew turning up to make sure, for example, there's not a group of yobs in there, or rowdy people or whatever else, and that the tables are secured, so the movement will be from the car straight into the restaurant to the secured area, as opposed to them turning up and they're having to queue for a seat.
Yeah.
So that would be the reason why there would have maybe advance party of officers to go there to make sure the area is secure and ready for the arrival of Prince Andrew and the other guests. So that would have been noted in their logs, their police officers' notebooks.
Yeah.
Now those notes are kept from between 6 and 30 years, but obviously we don't know. And in all honesty, from my own experience, no information. You're not going to get any information on any documents from the Royal Protection Command.
At all.
It's just not. The FBI have got no chance of getting information.
If Prince Andrew was going out to Epstein's Caribbean island,
yeah,
presumably they would vet.
Yeah, I mean that's a little bit different to the pocketbooks in terms of we've got a life expectancy for the books, as in before they're destroyed between 6 and 30.
No, I meant, but what would be the process?
But that's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is they could always say, "Oh, the books have been destroyed," because that's the lifespan, so they could cover any angles. But
the officers would have amnesia, obviously.
Well, yeah, obviously if they've forgotten.
Yeah.
But with regards to foreign travel, the Royal Protection have an office that would liaise with whatever country it was. You're not going to. A royal does just not get on a plane. And
that was my point. Yeah,
that doesn't happen. It's all pre-planned, and as you mentioned before, potentially you would have officers travelling to the location prior to the arrival of the principal, whichever member of the royal family it is. Or potentially in the Epstein case, what would have happened is, say for example, in the New York address, so a Royal Protection Command would have liaised with maybe the FBI or the local force in that area where that address was. The reason for doing that is for them to do checks on the premises, to see who owns the premises, also who resides in the premises, to make sure they're not convicted murderers or the house belongs to the mafia or stuff like that could embarrass the royal family.
Sure.
Well, obviously on this particular occasion it came back to Mr. Epstein, who was convicted of child sex offences. So obviously the American contingent who've done the checks would have forwarded this information back to the Royal Protection Command, who would have then briefed Prince Andrew on obviously that there is an issue because you're going there to visit a person who's a convicted child sex offender, which in anyone's eyes is a serious no-no.
Yeah.
And obviously what must have happened, there would have been records of emails backwards and forwards between the two
law enforcement
agencies, and there probably would have been meetings as well, meetings with the Royal Protection commanders to discuss the issue of the royal household.
What a nightmare.
So, but the point being is there would have been a paper trail for that, and there would have been advice given to Prince Andrew, and that advice would have clearly been, do not travel to this location and meet this person for
these reasons
of Well, he obviously went against that advice. People were leaning on the protection officers, looking for them to break. The protection officers that were with him at the islands and would have potentially seen stuff are not going to say anything against Prince Andrew. If they were going to say anything, they would have said it by now. So whatever Prince Andrew has shared with his officers, what he has in effect done potentially is incriminated them.
I don't know if you've heard of this fella, Tony Lundy.
No.
Scotland, he was a very, very senior superintendent at Scotland Yard. World in Action did a fantastic documentary about him. The BBC Brass Tacks made a fantastic documentary, but that was closed down and was not allowed to be broadcast. But back in the late 80s and early 90s, he was taking £200,000 cash from cocaine dealers. The FBI told the yard that they've got somebody inside who's corrupt. It turned out to be Superintendent Tony Lundy, and he was allowed to resign on ill health, and it all went away. And that's serious. We're talking about, we're not talking about letting people off parking fines because they're mates or speeding offences. 200 grand cash in the early 90s were a lot of money, be a lot of money today.
Definitely.
So that's proper corruption.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is, and it is quite similar to what happened to me. I was asked to resign, and most of it would go away
because they're trying to guard the reputation of the police. That's what this is all about.
That's what it is. I mean, how much of it would have gone away had I resigned? I don't know.
No, and we've been assisted by super hack Michael Gillard, who wrote some fantastic books on police corruption. His latest book is for Queen and Currency, tackling issues between within the Royal Police Protection Unit. It's a fantastic book, and Paul Page actually plays a significant role in revealing really what the culture is like, how it works, and more importantly, the lack of accountability. So that's why we're making these videos.